There were faces in the wrapping paper. Human faces, screaming. I'd been wrapping Christmas gifts for my retro holiday party using vintage paper I'd bought at the Seattle Antique Market that afternoon. Thick, textured stuff with red foil and gold snowflakes, the kind they don't make anymore. $3 from an elderly woman with yellowed fingernails who seemed eager to get rid of it. The paper caught the light strangely as I unrolled it across my dining table. Under the gold snowflakes, shadows appeared. Not from my overhead light, but from within the paper itself. I smoothed it flat, thinking it was just age spots or water damage. But the shadows had shapes, contours, features. They looked like faces. My hands started shaking before my brain fully processed what I was seeing. I held a section up to my desk lamp, and my stomach dropped. A woman's face stared back at me through the translucent paper. Her mouth was open wide, caught mid-scream. Her eyes were huge, terrified, frozen in an expression so vivid and specific that it couldn't be accidental. This wasn't a pattern in the design. This was someone's actual face. I unrolled more, my breath coming faster. A man with his head twisted at an impossible angle. A young woman with ligature marks visible on her neck. A teenage boy with his skull caved in on one side. All of them screaming, all of them dead. I counted 12 faces in the section I'd unrolled. The roll still had at least 15 feet left. I should have stopped there, should have called the police immediately. But I'm a history teacher. Curiosity is an occupational hazard. I needed to understand what I was looking at before I sounded crazy to authorities. On the back of the paper, I found faded ink stamps. Christmas Collection 1987. Miller Print Shop, Tacoma, Washington. Premium quality. My laptop was already open on the dining table. I typed with trembling fingers. Miller Print Shop, Tacoma, 1987. The search results loaded, and the first headline made my chest tighten. Tacoma Print Shop destroyed in suspicious fire. Owner missing. The article was from December 28th, 1987. The Miller Print Shop had burned to the foundation on Christmas night. The owner, John Miller, 43, had vanished. Police found traces of accelerant, arson, but Miller was never located and no charges were ever filed. I clicked deeper, my heart hammering. More articles appeared, older ones from throughout 1987. Fourth woman disappears in Tacoma area. Police link 7 missing persons cases. FBI joins hunt for serial killer. 7 people had vanished in Tacoma between January and December 1987. All young adults between 19 and 34. All last seen within a 5-mile radius of the print shop district. The disappearances stopped after the fire. John Miller had been a person of interest, but without bodies or evidence, the cases went cold. The bodies were never found. I looked back at the wrapping paper spread across my desk, at those screaming faces frozen in red foil. My mouth went dry. This is impossible, I thought. This can't be real. But the faces were right there, undeniable, staring at me with their mouths open in silent screams. The paper had been printed in 1987 at Miller's shop. The year 7 people vanished, the year the shop burned down. John Miller hadn't just worked with paper. He'd wrapped his victims in it. I spent the next hour photographing each face with my phone, zooming in as close as I could. The detail was impossible. Individual strands of hair, the precise shape of pupils dilated in terror. Even the texture of skin. This wasn't just an image printed on paper. It was like the paper had absorbed them somehow, captured them at the moment of death. My academic brain kicked in, pushing past the horror. I created a folder on my laptop called Miller Victims, downloaded every article I could find about the disappearances. 7 names, 7 faces in the missing persons photos from 1987. Then I compared them to the faces in the paper. Sarah Chen, 23, disappeared March 15th, 1987. Last seen leaving her shift at a downtown restaurant. Her face was in the wrapping paper. Third from the left edge, mouth open in a silent scream that matched the terror in her missing persons photo. Marcus Webb, 19, disappeared May 2nd, 1987. College student, never made it home from the library. His face was there too, skull visibly crushed on the right side. I matched 5 of the 7 missing persons to faces in the paper within the first 2 hours. The other 2 were harder to identify. The images more degraded or the angles wrong. But I knew they had to be there somewhere in the remaining footage of paper I hadn't unrolled yet. It was past 2 in the morning when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The faces were moving, not dramatically, not like in a horror movie, but their eyes had shifted. When I'd first photographed them, they'd all been staring straight ahead, frozen in death. Now, 3 hours later, their pupils had rotated, all of them looking in the same direction, to the right, toward the edge of the paper, toward something. I sat frozen in my chair, staring at my phone screen, comparing the original photos to what I was seeing now. The change was subtle, but undeniable. Sarah Chen's eyes had moved. Marcus Webb's eyes had moved. All 12 visible faces, their gazes slowly rotating like compass needles finding north. They were trying to show me something. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. I was alone in my apartment at 2:17 in the morning with wrapping paper that contained the souls, or echoes, or whatever the hell they were, of murdered people. And those echoes were aware. Communicating. I made coffee I didn't want, pace in my kitchen, trying to decide what to do. Call the police and sound insane? Hi, yes, I bought haunted wrapping paper, and the dead people in it are moving their eyes at me. They'd think I was on drugs or having a breakdown. No, I needed more. I needed to understand what they were trying to tell me. I returned to the dining table and unrolled more paper with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. The faces continued. More victims, more screaming mouths, more frozen terror. But about 3 feet down, they changed. Instead of faces, there were symbols. Or maybe they were just meant to look like symbols. Lines and shapes that could pass for decorative elements in the gold foil pattern. But when I looked closer, they were too deliberate, too specific. They were directions. I grabbed a notepad and started sketching what I saw, my pen shaking across the page. 3 parallel lines running vertically. A curved shape like a backward C. A square with a diagonal slash through it. Another set of parallel lines, these running horizontally, perpendicular to the first set. It looked like a crude map. The faces were all looking toward these symbols, showing me where to look, where to go, where their bodies were buried. The realization hit me like cold water. This was why the paper had survived 37 years. Why it had ended up in my hands at a flea market in 2024. The victims weren't just trapped in the paper. They were waiting for someone to understand, someone to find them. I couldn't sleep. Spent the next day calling in sick to work, drinking too much coffee, printing satellite images of Tacoma from 1987 and 2024. I researched the locations of John Miller's known properties. His print shop, his house on the north side, his parents' farm outside the city limits. My apartment filled with papers, maps, printed articles. I pinned them to my living room wall like a detective at a crime show. Somewhere in this information was the answer. Somewhere was the location those symbols pointed to. But I kept hitting dead ends. The 3 parallel lines could be roads, or a fence, or a creek. The backward C could be anything. I was guessing, not solving. On the second day, exhausted and desperate, I did something I knew was stupid. I went back to the antique market. The Seattle Antique Market was busy on a Thursday afternoon. Tourists and collectors browsing through vendor stalls packed with vintage furniture, old signs, dusty books. I found the elderly woman's booth in the back corner, exactly where it had been 2 days ago. She was there. Same yellowed fingernails, same tired eyes. When she saw me approaching, something changed in her expression. Recognition, and something else. Fear. She recognized me the moment I approached her booth. Her eyes went wide, then filled with something like hope and terrors mixed together. "You figured it out," she said quietly, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. "The paper. You're not the first who's bought it. Every few years, someone smart enough sees what's there." She leaned closer. "Most of them don't come back to talk to me." My throat went dry. I managed to ask who she was. Helen Webb, Marcus's mother. She'd been 14 when John Miller took her son. 64 now. 50 years spent trying to find where he'd buried her baby. She told me the story in fragments, her hands shaking the entire time. Miller's wife had sold her the paper in 1992, not knowing what it contained. When Helen unrolled it at home, she saw his face. Her Marcus. She'd been selling it piece by piece ever since, waiting for someone who could read the map, someone who could finish what she was too old to do. I asked about the police. She laughed bitterly. She'd tried in 1993. They'd thought she was crazy with grief. Gave her a pamphlet for a support group. She pressed something into my hand. A folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. A property deed for 37 acres in Graham, Washington, purchased by Miller's father in 1952. With a hand-drawn map in the margin showing the same symbols that were on the wrapping paper. "Find him," she whispered. "Find my Marcus. Please." I drove home with the deed on my passenger seat, my mind racing. I had the location now. Real coordinates, not just symbols. I should call the police. Should turn over the paper, the deed, all my research. But I kept thinking about what Helen had said. They'd dismissed her in 1993. Would they believe me in 2024? A history teacher with haunted wrapping paper and a 50-year-old property deed? I needed proof, physical proof, something the police couldn't dismiss. I needed to go there myself. Graham, Washington looked exactly like every rural logging town in the Pacific Northwest. A handful of buildings clustered around a 2-lane highway, surrounded by dense evergreen forest that pressed in from all sides. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and strangers are noticed immediately. I parked at a gas station and studied my printed maps, trying to ignore the voice in my head screaming that this was stupid and reckless. The Miller property was accessible via an old service road about 3 miles east. The road wasn't on GPS anymore, but I could see where it branched off the main highway. I'd brought my phone, fully charged, with a location shared to my best friend Jake in Seattle. If I didn't text him by 6 p.m., he'd call the police. It was 2:47 p.m. now. I had 3 hours. I bought a coffee I didn't want, used the bathroom, and tried to look like a lost tourist rather than someone about to trespass on private property to search for 37-year-old corpses. The service road was barely visible. Just 2 tire ruts through the undergrowth, blocked by a rusty chain and a faded "no trespassing" sign. I parked my car off the highway, pocketed my phone and the small folding shovel I'd bought at REI, and ducked under the chain. The forest was silent. Not peaceful silent, wrong silent. No birds, no wind, no rustling in the underbrush. Just my footsteps crunching through dead needles and my own breathing, too loud in my ears. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every shadow looked wrong. Every tree seemed to be watching. What am I doing? I thought. This is how people die in horror movies. Alone in the woods, looking for evidence of a serial killer. But I kept walking. I followed the map on my phone. The creek appeared first, exactly where the wrapping paper had indicated. 3 parallel lines. I stepped across it on moss-covered stones, my boots slipping on the wet surface. The sound of running water was the only noise in the entire forest. The logging road came next, curving through the trees like a backward sea. I was getting close. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. The clearing appeared after 20 more minutes of walking. It was smaller than I'd expected. Maybe 30 feet across, choked with blackberry vines and new-growth saplings. In the center, I could see the concrete foundation where a utility shed had stood, half hidden under decades of vegetation. This was it, the square with a diagonal slash. The foundation. This was where they were buried. 7 people wrapped in Christmas paper, hidden under 37 years of forest floor. I took out my phone to call 911. 3 bars. Finally, a signal. That's when I saw the truck. It was parked about 50 yards away, hidden in a cluster of trees I'd walked right past. Dark green, old but well-maintained. Washington plates. And on the tailgate, barely visible through the shadows, a faded bumper sticker. Miller Print Shop. Quality since 1952. My blood turned to ice. Someone was already here. I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, deliberate. Boots on dead needles. My entire body locked up. Every survival instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I turned around with agonizing slowness. The man standing at the clearing's edge was in his 60s. Gray-haired and thin, wearing work clothes and gloves. He had a shovel in one hand. Not a folding camping shovel like mine. A real one, with dirt on the blade. His face was weathered, lined, ordinary. The kind of face you'd see at any hardware store or coffee shop and immediately forget. Except for his eyes. His eyes were flat, empty, like looking at a mannequin. "Alex Turner," he said. His voice was raspy, unused. "Took you longer than I expected." My blood turned to ice. He knew my name. Oh God, he knew my name. He told me everything as he stepped into the clearing, shovel in hand. How he'd been watching me since I bought the paper. Followed me home Tuesday night. Watched through my dining room window while I matched faces to news articles. Watched me figure out the map. His voice was casual, conversational, like we were discussing the weather. I was smart, he said, just like they were. John Miller, still alive, still here. Run, my brain screamed, run. But my legs wouldn't move. I was frozen, staring at this man who'd killed people for 37 years and was standing here now, talking about watching me sleep. I managed to ask about the paper, how it worked. Special ink, he explained. His own formulation. Silver nitrate base with certain additions. If you wrapped something in it while it was still warm, still dying, the paper remembered, held on to it. He'd thought it was his imagination at first. Then he started seeing their faces appear in the foil. Beautiful, he called it. He took another step closer. My phone was in my pocket. 3 bars of signal. Jake waiting for my check-in text. But I couldn't move, couldn't reach for it. He kept talking about burning the shop to destroy evidence, about keeping samples of the paper, selling them slowly over the years, watching to see if anyone noticed. Most people never did. But every few years, someone figured it out. Someone smart. Someone curious. Someone who came here alone. I asked how many. My voice barely a whisper. 12, he said. I'd make 13. Lucky number. He raised the shovel. The spell broke. I ran. The forest was a blur of green and brown as I crashed through underbrush, branches whipping at my face. Behind me, I heard Miller's footsteps. Steady, unhurried, confident. He knew these woods. I didn't. He'd been hunting here for 37 years. My phone was in my hand now, but I couldn't spare the attention to dial. I just ran, trying to remember which direction led back to the service road. Everything looked the same. Trees, ferns, more trees. I'd gotten turned around. A root caught my foot and I went down hard, the phone flying from my hand. Pain exploded in my palms as I hit the ground. I scrambled on my hands and knees, searching frantically through the dead needles. Found it. Cracked screen, but still working. Miller emerged from the trees behind me. He wasn't running, didn't need to. He told me they all ran. That was the best part. The paper worked better when they were afraid. Fear did something to the chemistry. Made the impression stronger. Made the faces more vivid. I backed away, phone clutched in one hand. My other hand found a rock the size of a softball. Not much of a weapon, but it was something. My only chance. Miller raised the shovel like a baseball bat. I threw the rock. It hit him in the face with a crack I felt in my bones. Miller staggered back, blood streaming from his nose. The shovel dropped. I didn't wait to see if he'd get up. I ran again, this time following the sound of the creek. Water meant the service road. The service road meant my car. My car meant safety. The creek appeared through the trees. I splashed across it without caring about wet boots, my breath burning in my lungs. I could hear him behind me. Not speaking now, just breathing hard, crashing through the underbrush. Not so calm anymore. The logging road. The chain. My car. Exactly where I'd left it. I yanked the door open, jammed the key in the ignition with shaking hands. The engine caught on the second try. I was already moving before the door fully closed, tires spinning on the dirt shoulder as I pulled onto the highway. In the rearview mirror, I saw Miller emerge from the trees, standing in the middle of the service road, watching me go. Even from this distance, I could see him smile. Like this was all part of some game. Like he wasn't worried at all. Like he knew exactly where I lived. I drove straight to the Tacoma Police Department, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the wheel. I told them everything. The wrapping paper, the faces, the map, the clearing, John Miller alive and still guarding his burial ground. I showed them my photos, my maps, Helen Webb's property deed, my research. The detective who took my statement was a woman named Santos, maybe 40, with tired eyes that had seen too much. She listened without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral. When I finished, she asked me to wait. 2 hours later, she returned with a different expression. Disturbed, believing. They'd sent a team to the coordinates I'd provided, found the clearing, the foundation, and remains. Multiple sets, wrapped in old paper, exactly like I'd described. DNA analysis would take time, but I might have just solved a 37-year-old case. Relief flooded through me. They believed me. They'd found the bodies. It was over. Then Santos told me the rest. Miller was gone. The truck had vanished. They'd issued an APB, contacted the FBI, but he was out there somewhere, alive, free. My relief evaporated. Santos continued. They'd found more at the burial site. Sealed rolls of wrapping paper hidden in a waterproof container. The same design as mine. Red with gold snowflakes. Fresh paper. Recently manufactured. The print shop had burned in 1987, but John Miller had never stopped making his special paper. He'd been wrapping them for 37 years. The 7 from 1987 were just the beginning. My stomach dropped. I asked how many. They didn't know yet. But based on what they'd found in that container, the number was much higher than 7. My apartment didn't feel safe anymore. I'd changed the locks that first night back from Tacoma. Installed cameras on my front door, my back door, my windows. Reported Miller's license plate to every police department between Seattle and Portland. Detective Santos had my number on speed dial. But none of it mattered. Miller had been watching me for days before I even knew his name. He knew where I lived, where I worked, my routines, what time I came home, what time I went to bed. He'd been inside my apartment. I knew it now, though I couldn't prove it. Small things were wrong. A book moved on my shelf. My coffee mug in the sink when I was sure I'd put it in the dishwasher. The faint smell of copper and old flowers. The smell Helen Webb had described from Miller's shop. The smell that appeared in my apartment at night. The wrapping paper was in an evidence bag at the police station now. I'd given Santos everything. The whole roll, all my photographs, all my research, the property deed. They were using it to search for more victims. The faces in the paper were leading them to clearing after clearing, burial site after burial site across Washington state. The death toll kept rising. 11, 15, 23. But Miller was still out there. I'd been stupid about one thing. The gift I'd wrapped for my mother, the first present I'd tried to wrap that Tuesday night before I saw the faces. I'd finished wrapping it later, using different paper. But I'd already addressed it, already taken it to the post office. Priority shipping to her house in Portland. Arriving December 22nd. I called her house 15 times on the 22nd. No answer. I called her cell. Straight to voicemail. I called her neighbors, her best friend Carol, anyone I could think of. No one had seen her since yesterday evening. It was 11:47 p.m. on December 22nd when I got the text from an unknown number. Your mother makes 12. You're 13. Merry Christmas. I showed Detective Santos. She traced the number. Prepaid burner, already disabled. We drove to Portland together that night. Police escort with lights and sirens screaming through the darkness. Every minute felt like an hour. My mother lived alone. She was 63. She had a bad hip and couldn't run. If Miller had her, she was defenseless. Her house was a small craftsman in the Alberta Arts District, painted yellow with white trim. Christmas lights hung from the eaves, blinking red and green in the December darkness. The front door was unlocked. We found her in the living room, unconscious but breathing. The wrapped present was open on the floor beside her. The vintage camera I'd bought at the same antique market where I'd found the paper. The wrapping paper was scattered around her, the normal paper I'd used to replace Miller's paper. But there was more paper too. Red paper with gold snowflakes. Fresh paper that hadn't been there when I'd wrapped the gift. Miller had been here, had replaced my normal paper with his special paper, had left it for my mother to touch. And her face, her actual face, was slack, eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids like she was in REM sleep. Dreaming, or seeing something I couldn't see. The paramedics took her to Providence Hospital. The doctors couldn't explain it. All her vitals were normal, brain activity normal. She was just locked inside her own head, trapped in some state between consciousness and coma, her eyes moving constantly beneath the lids, her lips forming soundless words. I sat beside her hospital bed for 3 days, holding her hand, watching her eyes move beneath the lids, watching her lips move, forming words I couldn't hear. I barely slept, barely ate, just sat there, consumed by guilt. This was my fault. I'd brought that paper into my apartment. I'd wrapped a gift with it before I knew what it was. I'd led Miller straight to my mother. Detective Santos pulled up a chair across from me on the third day, Christmas Day. She asked what I thought my mother was seeing. His victims, I said. My voice was hoarse from not using it. Their memories. The paper absorbed them when they died, and now she was trapped in their final moments. Santos was quiet for a long time. Then she told me the FBI was involved now. They were searching Miller's property again. They'd found evidence of a workshop, more printing equipment, chemicals, paper. He'd been manufacturing this stuff for decades. I asked if it helped my mother. Knowing that. No, Santos said, but they were going to find him. My mother's eyes snapped open. I jumped, nearly falling out of my chair. Santos reached for her weapon on instinct. My mother stared at the ceiling, seeing something that wasn't there. Her mouth opened. 7 in Graham, she whispered. Her voice was wrong, too flat, too emotionless. 4 in Olympia, 9 in Spokane, 3 in Portland, 23 families waiting. He shows them Christmas, makes them think they're going home for the holidays, wraps them when they sleep. Santos grabbed her radio, calling for teams in Olympia, Spokane, Portland. Ground-penetrating radar, forensic units, everything. My mother's head turned toward me with mechanical precision, her neck moving in a way that wasn't quite right. Her eyes were looking at me, but also through me, seeing something beyond this hospital room. He's coming for you on Christmas Eve, Alex. At 11:47 p.m. The same time he came for me. The same time the paper remembers best. Her hand squeezed mine with painful pressure. But he doesn't know that the paper works both ways. He showed me everything, every person he wrapped, every Christmas he spent hunting. He wanted me to break. A smile crossed her face. My mother's smile, but with something else behind it. Something cold and knowing. I didn't break. I took it all. Everything he tried to show me. Now I have his memories too. I can see what he sees, feel what he feels. Her grip on my hand tightened until I gasped. He's afraid, Alex. For the first time in 37 years, John Miller is afraid. Because now someone knows everything. Her eyes rolled back. She collapsed against the pillows, slipping back into that half-conscious state. But I'd heard her. Heard something in her voice that wasn't quite my mother anymore. Santos and I stared at each other across the hospital bed, neither of us knowing what to say. Over the next week, forensic teams dug up clearings across Washington and Oregon. 23 victims became 41, then 53. Bodies wrapped in Christmas paper, buried in places only my mother could identify. She'd wake periodically, speak in that flat voice, give coordinates that led to more graves. The FBI established a command center in Tacoma. The case made national news. The Christmas paper killer, they called him. 43 years of hunting. 53 confirmed victims, with more suspected. And John Miller was still out there. My mother came home on New Year's Day. She looked like herself, walked fine, talked normally, hugged me and cried. But there was something different in her eyes, something that watched and calculated. That first night home, Mom sat at my kitchen table with tea neither of us was drinking. She told me she could feel him sometimes, when he was close, when he was thinking about us, like there was a thread connecting them now. The paper had put him in her head, but it had also put her in his. I started to say something, but she cut me off. He was going to come for me, she said. Next Christmas Eve. He had to. I'd exposed him, found the bodies, ruined 37 years of careful work. She took my hand. Her skin was cold despite the warm tea, but we were going to be ready. She was staying with me now. Couldn't go back to her house in Portland, the place where Miller had found her, touched her, changed her. We'd converted my spare bedroom into hers, installed more security cameras, more locks. But I knew it wouldn't stop him. Miller had walked through my apartment while I slept, had watched me through my windows. Security systems meant nothing to someone who'd been evading police for 43 years. Detective Santos called every few days with updates. They were close. They had his patterns now, his safe houses, his supply sources for the chemicals he used in the ink. It was only a matter of time. But time was something Miller had in abundance. He'd waited 37 years between his first victims and now. He could wait a few more months. My mother started drawing maps in a notebook. Every morning, she'd sit at the kitchen table with coffee and sketch clearings, write coordinates, mark locations where bodies were buried, places she'd seen in Miller's memories when the paper had connected them. Sometimes she'd speak in voices that weren't hers. A young woman's voice, bright and scared. He said he'd drive me to my parents' house for Christmas. An older man's voice, confused. I just wanted to get home before the roads got worse. A child's voice, heartbreaking. He had candy canes. On those days, I couldn't look at her. Couldn't reconcile this thing wearing my mother's face with the woman who'd raised me. The paper had changed her into something else. Something that contained pieces of 53 dead people, alongside whatever remained of her own consciousness. But she was still my mother, still in there somewhere. She had to be. It's December 20th now, 4 days until Christmas Eve. My mother says she can feel Miller getting closer. She wakes up at night, staring at the wall, tracking something I can't see. She'll tell me he's in Oregon, or crossing the state line, or thinking about me, about the way I hit him with that rock, about how I'll scream. I've been preparing. We both have. I've read everything about Miller's ink formula, the silver nitrate base, the special additives my mother identified from his memories. I know what those additions are now. Human tissue, bone fragments ground into the ink. That's what makes the paper remember. That's what captures the faces of the dying. I've been making my own paper. It took me 3 weeks to get the formula right. 3 weeks of late-night work in my apartment, mixing chemicals I'd ordered online, using the home printing setup I'd bought specifically for this. 3 weeks of trial and error until I produced paper that looked exactly like Miller's Christmas Collection, 1987. The baseball bat is by my bed now, and a roll of red paper with gold snowflakes, printed fresh last week. My formula, my special ink. I haven't told my mother what's in the ink I used. Haven't told her what tissue I ground into the silver nitrate base. The antique market vendor, Helen Webb, Marcus's mother, died in her sleep on December 15th. Natural causes, the obituary said. Peacefully, after years of grief. She donated her body to science, but I claimed it first as her designated next of kin, a lie that a helpful funeral director had accepted along with a substantial cash payment. Helen wanted to find her son, wanted to stop Miller. She'd spent 50 years trying, now she'd get her chance. Her tissue was in my ink, her bone fragments ground fine and mixed with silver nitrate. If Miller's paper could capture the dying, mine could capture the dead. And Helen Webb was very, very angry. My mother is sitting across from me now at the kitchen table. She's not looking at me. She's staring at the wall, eyes distant, tracking something I can't see. He's close, she says quietly. 4 days. He's so confident. Thinks the paper makes him invincible. She looks at me then, and I see something fierce in her eyes. Something that's part her and part 53 other people who died wrapped in Christmas paper. But he's wrong. The paper works both ways. I look at my roll of special paper, sitting on the counter next to the baseball bat. 4 days until Christmas Eve. 4 days until we teach John Miller what it feels like to be the one who's wrapped. This year, he isn't the only one who knows how to hunt.